Good morning from the National Weather Service office in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I'm Meteorologist Donald Jones. It's been a little while since we've done one of these live social media briefings. That's not a bad thing because that means we've been fairly quiet weather-wise. Unfortunately, it's time for us to all gather around the campfire again and discuss some hazardous weather across the area because we knew it wouldn't last forever. Eventually, something was going to come knocking, and I won't call this unusual because it seems like it's becoming a almost yearly thing where we're dealing with some form of winter weather across the region, and that is no different this year. We are looking at the potential for some freezing rain and ice this weekend with what is going to be probably the coldest air mass that we've seen across the area so far this year. And that'll be rolling through the area, it looks like Friday night with that cold front. And then we're going to have some rain, some continued moisture kind of developing behind that cold front. And that's going to lead to the potential for freezing rain. Why freezing rain and not snow or sleet? I'll talk about that here in just a second, as well as all of the impacts that we're expected to see across the area, because unfortunately, freezing rain and the ice is the worst kind of winter weather. That has the potential to cause a lot of damage across the region. As always, this is a live interactive briefing, so if you have any questions as we go through our briefing, feel free to post them in our comments section. I see several of you have found that already here this morning, and we'll be happy to answer your questions just as soon as we wrap up our briefing. I'm sure you have some. Let's go ahead and jump into the briefing here this morning, and I realize this may be a little bit difficult to see behind me at times. I will make it full screen for you to take a little bit closer look for it or at it as we go through. But essentially what we're going to have here is like I said, a cold front is going to be rolling through the area. It looks like Friday night. That is going to bring in some very cold air behind it. And that in and of itself is a little bit of a story. We're going to be looking at a long duration period, potentially of below freezing temperatures. So even that has the potential to cause some issues across the region with pipes. So, we'll start just right off the bat before we get into the ice issue. This is going to be a situation this weekend where we are going to want to protect the pipes, potentially run the water. That could become an issue if we do deal with any power outages associated with the ice. You may not have much of a choice in running the water if the water stations go down and can't provide water pressure. We'll get into that a little more here in just a bit. But we are looking at the potential for freezing rain to develop. It looks like beginning sometime midday Saturday, and that just kind of lends credence to the idea of this very cold air mass, that the fact that in the middle of the day is when we could potentially start seeing things begin to freeze. Normally we would expect temperatures to be at their coldest at night, and that's when we see our freezing rain. But we could be looking at temperatures at or below freezing even in the middle of the day on Saturday. So it's going to be a fairly significant Arctic blast, as they call it, as far as the air mass goes. Somebody's telling me I've got a microphone issue. I think my microphone's working. Is it not working? My volume is kind of low, they said. Let me see if I can fix that for you real quick before we really get into it. There is a button I can press. I set it to reduce the background noise, and that may have done it. Okay, let me know if that helps any. A lot of people say it's working fine. Maybe you can hear me a little better now. I'll go ahead and keep on here, and if you got a problem with it, let me know. So essentially, we're going to be looking at midday, roughly Saturday, for this potential ice accumulation to begin, and it's going to continue through Saturday night and into Sunday. So this is going to be a fairly long duration potential event where we could be looking at almost 24 consecutive hours of on and off freezing rain across the region. That could lead to some significant ice accumulations. This is kind of a little bit closer look at the exact timeline. You can see we're expecting the freezing rain aspect to begin perhaps as early as Saturday morning. Now, there may be some showers and thunderstorms, some liquid showers and thunderstorms as the cold front moves through. That'll just be ordinary rain. We're also going to be looking at that today and tomorrow. I'll talk about that here as well. But we're looking at the freezing rain potentially beginning as early as Saturday morning, but continuing all the way through, you can see, probably Sunday afternoon, possibly into Sunday evening. Now, the majority of that freezing rain and potential ice is going to occur Saturday evening into Saturday night. I know a lot of people have a lot of activities planned for this weekend. The good news is that this is not going to, at least initially, affect schools. We'll see if it becomes an issue come Monday. But I know there are a lot of social plans over the weekend, especially being the Mardi Gras season. So that is something we're going to have to bear in mind, especially as it relates to travel as we go through Saturday and Sunday. But it's looking right now, Saturday afternoon into Sunday morning, you would expect that that's going to be our coldest time. That is when we are going to have the biggest potential for freezing rain and ice. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea as far as the time frame. I can't give you exact timing, especially this far out, because what happens with these, what we're talking about freezing rain and ice, these are going to be very light showers. And they're not going to be necessarily constant showers. They're going to be kind of broken up. So telling you exactly when it's going to start freezing rain, when exactly the roads are going to close, that's kind of beyond my abilities at this point. But if we are going to be looking at road closures, they're likely going to be Saturday evening into Saturday night. And the fact that we're not going to get above freezing most likely in at least some locations means that once those roads close, once those roads ice over, we're going to be looking at it continuing until we get a significant amount of time above freezing and that ice has a chance to actually melt off. So as I talked about a minute ago, we are going to have a strong cold front rolling through the area. That's what's going to be causing all of this. And why freezing rain rather than sleet or snow is going to come down to exactly how deep that very cold layer near the surface is. We're going to have essentially a very shallow layer of air right along the surface. So this frontal boundary is going to be the slope of it, as we call it, let me turn this way, is very shallow. So we're going to have a very shallow layer of cold air right at the surface and then warmer air above it. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. But that's why we're not going to be looking at snow, because as that precipitation falls through, it's going to melt before reaching the ground. I'm going to talk about that more here in just a second. But let's get into the meat and potatoes here. Here's the real bottom line. And I want to preface this by saying, as always, this forecast is subject to change and likely will change. But keep that in mind while we look at this here. This is our forecast ice accumulations for the weekend. So this is going to be the entire event from essentially Saturday morning through sometime on Sunday, whenever we finally get all of this precipitation out of here. This is a first estimate, so this is very much subject to change. So kind of keep that in mind. And, I keep saying that because it is a very difficult forecast. The exact temperatures, exactly where those showers set up is going to play a huge role in exactly what areas see the most ice accumulation. So don't focus specifically on exactly where you are in this graphic. Just kind of look at the overall trend. So obviously, the highest overall potential for ice accumulation is going to be further to the north across central Louisiana and interior parts of southeast Texas. So we're looking at anywhere between a quarter to up to a half inch of ice. And if you know anything about ice accumulation and freezing rain, that is a lot of ice. We start seeing significant impacts at about 1/10 of an inch. By the time you get into the quarter to half inch of ice accumulation, essentially what that means is there is a layer of ice, a quarter to a half inch thick, surrounding everything. So we're talking about tree branches, power lines, vehicles. A quarter to a half inch thick layer of ice that's a pretty good amount of ice. So kind of keep that in mind. And ice is very, very heavy. So if you wind up with a quarter to a half inch of ice on everything, on power lines, that adds hundreds or thousands of pounds of added weight. We start to see power lines failing and beginning to fall. Tree branches begin to break and fall down. So that's what we're going to talk about when we're getting into the impacts. A little bit further south, roughly from the I-10 corridor to roughly about Highway 190, we're looking at anywhere between about 1/10 to a quarter inch, which is still significant enough to cause some hazards. That's certainly enough for road closures. That's certainly enough for some power outages. Getting closer to the coastline, roughly south of the I-10 corridor, we're looking at none to maybe 1/10 of an inch on the high end. I think coastal portions of Cameron, Vermilion, Iberia, St. Mary, you're less likely to see significant ice accumulation with this. That's not to say you won't see some, but there is going to be the potential. The further north you go, the higher the overall potential is going to be for ice accumulation, which kind of makes sense. Knew that was going to happen. It happens every time I do a briefing. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about timing for the ice accumulation. This kind of gives you a little bit better idea as far as when we're expecting the ice accumulations. And again, this is very highly subject to change. This is getting probably a little bit more detailed than I'm comfortable with. But I did want to show you this just to kind of give you a better idea with regards to the exact timing. So we're going to be looking at ice accumulation beginning kind of right around midday. We could see a little bit of icing earlier in the morning, but I think from midday, especially as we get on towards the evening hours, you can see the highest numbers there are during the evenings, roughly from right after sunset through sunrise, Saturday night into Sunday morning. That's when we're expecting our most ice accumulation. Then we finally are going to get the activity out of here, the actual accumulating part of it, by about noontime on Sunday, maybe early afternoon. But what's important to keep in mind is if we're below freezing at that point Sunday afternoon, that ice isn't going to melt off. Or if we only get above freezing for 2 or 3 hours, that ice might not necessarily melt off. So as we go into Sunday night, temperatures are going to quickly fall back below freezing again. And then as we go into Monday morning, that ice will still be present. We'll have to see exactly how much ice falls and exactly where in order to determine whether the Monday morning commute and potential school issues are going to be a problem. But there's still a lot of uncertainty with regards to that. I'll just leave it right now at it is possible that there could be travel impacts on Monday if we see a significant amount of ice accumulation and those temperatures stay close to or below freezing. Did it again. Every time. This is taking a look at the ice accumulations across southeast Texas. Very similar as far as time frame. Maybe starting a little bit later in the afternoon, especially further south, close to the coastline. Essentially, it's going to be similar north to south as far as the timing as well. We're going to start seeing ice accumulation first across central Louisiana and up towards, say, Jasper, Newton, Tyler counties, those areas. And then as we get later into a Saturday afternoon, we'll see that activity work further to the south towards the coast. But as far as the ending time, still looking at a roughly similar time frame, kind of early afternoon, Sunday afternoon, for the activity to begin to come to an end. This is a look at our overall precipitation chances and actual timing. You can see we do have pretty high rain chances today, actually, and we do have some showers out there as well. I'll throw it over to the radar here real quick just to give you a quick look at that. We'll jump back into the ice in just a second, but you can see there are some light showers. Of course, this is all liquid because we are well above freezing right now. But we will be looking at these showers moving through this afternoon and this evening, and probably going to continue into tomorrow as well. It's going to be a kind of a dreary couple of days with the light rain moving in. Not expecting any kind of severe, nothing heavy. This is just going to be kind of a light soaking rain, which is actually good news considering how much of a drought we've been in lately. We could use a good soaking rain, and that's what we're going to get the next couple of days ahead of this potential ice storm this weekend. You can see the probabilities really ramp up Saturday afternoon through Sunday morning. We're looking at anywhere between about 70 to 90% chance of rain, and that's when we're expecting the temperatures to fall below zero. So, or below zero, yeah, that would be bad. Below freezing, and so we will be looking at that potential for freezing rain during that time. Taking a look at the southeast Texas probability is very similar as far as the timing, beginning, kind of midday Saturday. You can see that's where our highest overall probabilities are going to be, and then continuing through late Sunday morning, right around noontime Sunday for those precipitation chances. Now this is the graphic here I'm going to show you. It's a little bit difficult to read. You can see kind of the cities there. I didn't want to make this too large because I didn't want to have them overlapping each other. But this is essentially the probabilities of seeing a certain amounts of ice accumulation. The first graphic I'm showing you here, this is the probability of seeing any kind of ice accumulation. So this is a 1/100th of an inch or more, what we call measurable ice accumulation. So this isn't necessarily going to be enough to cause significant impacts, power outages, travel restrictions, stuff like that. This is just what is the probability of seeing any amount of ice accumulation. You can see across central Louisiana, interior parts of southeast Texas, looking at anywhere between about 70 to 80% chance. So it's very likely we're going to see some ice accumulation across those areas. Getting a little bit further south, between roughly the I-10 corridor and the Highway 190 corridor, we're looking at anywhere between about a 30 to 60% chance of some amount of ice accumulation. So the probabilities get to less than 50-50 to slightly above. And then as we get south of the I-10 corridor, the probabilities get even lower. So if you're south of Lake Charles, south of Lafayette, down towards New Iberia, you're looking at anywhere between a 0 to 20% chance. So the overall probability of you seeing any amount of ice accumulation is pretty low. It's not zero, but it is pretty low. And the probabilities of seeing significant impacts are very low as well. Now the next graphic I'm going to show you here, this is the probability of seeing a 1/10 of an inch of ice accumulation. This is where we start to see more significant impacts. This is where we start to see roads closed, perhaps some sporadic power outages, beginnings of tree branches beginning to get weak and fall. is about a tenth of an inch of accumulation. You can see the probabilities again. It's kind of broken down very similar. Roughly north of Highway 190, we're looking at anywhere between about a 60 to 70% chance. So that's a very high chance, considering most days the probability is close to zero. So we're looking at a 60 to 70% chance of ice accumulation of a tenth of an inch or more north of Highway 190. Again, between roughly Highway 190 and the I-10 corridor, between about a 15 to 40% chance. So here in Lake Charles, roughly about a 20% chance of seeing at least a tenth of an inch. That increases significantly as we get up towards DeRidder. You're looking at a 55% chance. Over towards Lafayette, you're looking at roughly about a 20% chance. By the time you get up towards Bill Platt, it's a 40% chance. Up towards Alexandria, 65% chance. So significant increases in probability as you go, just a few dozen miles north. But getting closer to the coast, see down towards Cameron, Hackberry, you're looking at a less than 10% chance. So that kind of gives you an idea as far as impactful amounts of ice accumulation. Now, getting even higher up, the probability of seeing a quarter inch or more of ice accumulation, this is where we start seeing real significant impacts. At a quarter inch, you're almost certainly going to be looking at power outages. You're absolutely going to be looking at roads and bridge closures at that point. And so you're pretty much in full maximum impact at this point for a quarter inch of ice accumulation. You can see there's roughly about a 25 to 45% chance of seeing a quarter inch or more of ice accumulation north of Highway 190. So this includes the Alexandria area, over towards Fort Polk, right over to DeRidder, you're looking at about a 35% chance there. Further to the east into Avoyles Parish, over towards Marksville, and then further west, Jasper, Newton, Woodville, you're in that roughly 30% chance range. South of Highway 190 to the I-10 corridor, we're looking at anywhere between about 10 to 25% chance. So northern Beauregard, northern Allen, northern Evangeline, you're roughly about 20%. Southern Beauregard, Allen, Evangeline, and northern Calcasieu, you're in about 10 to 20% chance. So this is a significant amount of ice accumulation at this point. That's why the probabilities get gradually lower when we're talking about higher amounts of ice accumulation. And you can see as we get closer to the coast, roughly south of the I-10 corridor, the probabilities of seeing a significant amount of ice accumulation drop to virtually zero. We're looking at about a 0 to 2% chance of seeing ice accumulation. Now, by the time we start getting into a half inch or more of ice accumulation, again, we're already in full, I don't want to call it panic mode, but this is pretty much a full shutdown type of situation. If you wind up in a half inch or more of ice accumulation, nobody's going anywhere. And we're looking at roughly about a 5 to 25% chance of that north of Highway 190. South to the coast, we'll get very low probabilities. So we're looking at roughly a 0 to 2% chance south of, say, Oberlin to Longville, over towards Kirbyville in Texas. Areas south of that, very low probabilities of seeing this much ice. Now, it's important to keep in mind, just like we were talking about earlier, this is very much subject to change. In fact, it's already changed somewhat this morning. So kind of keep that in mind, that what I'm showing you here is going to change between now and tomorrow, and now and Friday, and now and Saturday. As we get closer to the event, we get a better idea and a better handle on it. We can give you some better probability. So this is almost certainly going to change, but this is kind of what we're looking at the moment. Now let's talk. I just want to talk quickly here. I'm not going to harp on this too long, but for those who are interested in the meteorology, the why of it, this graphic here kind of gives you an idea of what we're talking about. Let me see. I think I've got a better one here. Yeah, here's a better one to kind of give you an idea of why we're looking at freezing rain instead of snow or sleet. And as I kind of hinted at here just briefly, let me get me out of the way so you can see the difference here. Now you can see just my little head. The graphic in the middle here, the freezing rain, that's what we're going to have. So essentially what's going to happen is this cold front is going to roll through, and it's going to give us a very shallow layer of below freezing temperatures right at the surface. And above it, we're going to have some significantly warmer air. So let me see if I can make this full screen so I can point a little bit. So up here, we're going to have snow developing. Now what's going to happen is as it falls through the atmosphere, the snow is going to warm up in this above freezing layer and melt into rain. Then right at the surface, we're going to have temperatures again below freezing. So it's going to fall to below 32 degrees, and that rainwater is going to fall through that sub-freezing temperature. And that water is going to drop to below freezing, but it's not going to have enough time to freeze into a sleet pellet before it actually reaches the ground. We're talking about just a few hundred feet of below freezing temperature. So what's going to happen is that the rainwater is actually going to enter a state what we call supercooled, where the water is actually going to be below freezing, but it's not going to be frozen, because the shape of a water droplet, if you're familiar with it roughly, it's kind of like a tear shape, a teardrop shape. The surface area and the curvature of that water allows it to fall to below freezing while still remaining a liquid. But what happens is when it hits the ground and it splashes and that shape is broken, then it freezes instantly on contact. That's what freezing rain is, and that's how it forms. So it's going to freeze onto immediately whatever it touches, whether that be a power line, a tree branch, the ground, your car, you potentially, although it's not going to stay frozen for long because your body heat will warm it up and melt it. But that's essentially what we're looking at, these super cooled rain droplets then hitting the ground and freezing instantly on contact. In the case of snow, we'd have a below freezing layer all the way from the surface to wherever the clouds are. And in the case of sleet, we would have a deeper cold layer here that would cause it to actually freeze before hitting the ground. That's how you get a sleet pellet. So we're going to be basically right in between those two to get this freezing rain. Now, there could be a mixture of sleet mixed in there, and that would actually be a good thing, because the more sleet you have, the less freezing rain you're going to have, the less accumulation you're going to have. So if you're getting sleet, that's actually good news for you from a impact perspective, because sleet is not going to freeze to a power line. It's not going to freeze to a tree. It's going to hit and bounce off and land on the ground. And sleet has a lot more traction to it to drive over than a slick layer of ice. So that kind of gives you just a brief, quick little meteorology lesson there on the actual why things are going to be the way they are here with this event this weekend. And if you have any questions about that, or if you're not sure, feel free to ask me a question there in the comments, and I'll come back to it here in just a bit. So besides the potential for ice accumulation, we are going to be looking at a long duration period of potential freezing temperatures. You can see these temperatures here. Once that cold front comes through Friday night, you can see the temperatures fall off from the 50s into the 30s by Saturday morning. A few areas are going to get above freezing Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening for a brief period of time, but most areas are going to see, you're looking at 30s, potentially 20s, a couple of teens potentially mixed into there as we get into Sunday night and Monday morning. So this is going to be a very cold air mass. Again, the coldest air we've probably seen so far this year or this season. And it's going to stick around from roughly Saturday morning all the way through probably sometime Tuesday or Wednesday next week. So you can see very cold air across the region for a 3 to 4 day period. And then you add in those wind chills, and you're looking at even colder. Now, the wind chill does not have any say-so. We were talking about just now the cold air mass near the surface. The wind chill does not have any say in where the rain freezes or anything like that. That's strictly based to how the air feels on human skin. It does not affect when pipes freeze. It does not affect when water freezes. So this is just for how it feels on human skin. But you can see Sunday night into Monday morning, we're looking at a few potentially single-digit wind chill values. Same thing for Saturday night into Sunday morning. There is going to be the potential for that wind chill getting down to the single digits. So yeah, it is absolutely going to be very, very cold out there. Same thing for Southeast Texas. You can see Southeast Texas cities here. Time frames roughly the same. It may be no, I don't want to say that. I'm not going to say what I just said. But we're looking at essentially 30s for pretty much most of the day Saturday, 20s to 30s all day Sunday, Monday, and then we add in those feel-like temperatures. And again, we're going to be close to the single digits for those feels-like temperatures early Sunday morning and again early Sunday morning. So regardless of how much ice we do or do not see, it is going to be really dang cold out there this weekend into early next week. Now, as the cold relates to the ice is how long those temperatures are going to stay below freezing as we go into the weekend here, because if we do see some ice development, it is not going to melt off until we get above freezing. So this is roughly from noon Friday to noon Saturday. So this is going to be when the cold front actually makes its way through, and we're going to be looking at that cold front moving through probably sometime late Friday evening. So we're not going to be looking at a huge period of below freezing temperatures between noon Friday and noon Saturday, but we are going to be looking at roughly from, we'll say, about midnight or a little after midnight for that front to move through. Across central Louisiana, early Saturday morning, we'll be looking at some pretty extended period of time below freezing. So we do need to protect pipes across central Louisiana as early as Friday night into Saturday morning. Now, as we get into Saturday into Sunday, we're looking at, look at this, we're looking at anywhere from 14 to a complete full 24 hours of below freezing temperatures. So essentially the entire day spent below freezing across central Louisiana and interior parts of southeast Texas. But anything above about 3 to 4 hours is going to be enough to pose a risk to pipes. So you can see pretty much the entire region for Saturday into Sunday is going to be well above that for freezing temperatures. So pipes are going to need to be protected across the entire area, not just central Louisiana. We're talking, Lake Charles, Lafayette, Beaumont, all the way to the coast. We're going to be looking at pipe protections for Saturday into Sunday, and then you can see Sunday into Monday, pretty much the entire region expected to remain very close to, if not below freezing for that entire period. So the entire region, again, going to have to continue to protect pipes as you're able. If the power goes out, especially if the power goes out at water stations, you may not be able to run water. So there's a very distinct possibility that we could lose water pressure if we have some significant power outages. And we're going to talk about impacts here. And let's go ahead and get into that since we brought up that water pressure, because that's just one of the potential impacts we could see with this. So this graphic here kind of shows the probabilities of seeing minor, moderate, we kind of break it into categories, impacts with this. So you can see the highest probabilities, if I can get me out of the way here again, you can see there's roughly about a 60 to 70% chance of seeing minor impacts across central Louisiana. This lines up pretty well with those ice accumulation graphics I showed you a bit ago. Towards the Beaumont, Lake Charles, Lafayette areas, we're looking at roughly about a 20 to 30% chance of minor impacts. And then right along the coast, roughly about a 10% chance of seeing at least minor impacts. Going forward, this is the possibility of moderate impacts. This is, we're talking about potential road closures. We're talking about potential power outages. You can see central Louisiana, roughly a 40 to 50% chance. Further south towards the Lake Charles, Lafayette area, roughly about a 5 to 10% chance. But again, this is subject to change too, and very well could change over the next couple of days as the computer models come into better agreement on exactly how much ice and exactly where that ice is going to be. So let's talk now about, then these are going to be kind of the worst case scenarios. What we can expect if we see that 10th quarter, half-inch layer of ice develop. What would the potential worst impacts be? Obviously, we could be looking at a layer of ice on the roadways, leading to loss of traction, roads potentially becoming impassable. Ice accumulating on power lines. We talked about that a couple of times already. That could cause power outages by themselves. We could also see ice accumulation on tree branches. Those tree branches could then fall onto the power lines. That could cause power outages as well. So yes, power outages are going to be a potential issue if we see any kind of significant ice accumulation. I learned this firsthand during the last ice storm, but we're going to get a glaze of ice on any kind of vehicles that are outdoors. Doors may be ice closed. I had that problem here. I was actually at the office working during the last ice storm. I went outside to leave, couldn't even get into my car. The door was iced closed. So that's something to kind of keep in mind as well. When you're thinking about your precautions, you may want to see about getting a shelter for your vehicle as well, so that when the ice does eventually get to melt, you're able to get into it and you don't also have a layer of glaze across your windshield so that you can't see. Those are kind of hard to melt off. You can do it, but you don't necessarily want to dump the hot water to melt it off. It'll melt it off, but it'll also potentially crack your windshield in the process. So you want to try to let that melt off naturally if you can. So what can you do to prepare? Okay, and this is preparing for a potential worst case scenario. Number one, due to power outages, you want to have an alternative source of keeping warm. So wood-fired fireplace, gas fireplace could potentially work as well, although those don't necessarily produce the same amount of heat. If you have a generator, you can potentially use that to run a space heater or another form of heat. A coworker of mine made me put this on here in parentheses, but it's absolutely true. Do not use generators indoors. We had more deaths related to people using generators indoors following Hurricane Laura than we did from the hurricane itself. So I think we've had enough experience with power outages in this part of the world that we're familiar with that we're familiar with what to do with a generator. But just in case anybody's not sure, maybe new to the area, maybe not familiar with generators, do not use generators indoor. I think the general advice is to make sure they're at least 10 feet away from your house, because the gases emitted from gasoline-powered generators are toxic. There's a lot of carbon monoxide in there. Carbon monoxide is odorless, it's colorless, you're not going to see it. You're just going to get very sleepy and fall asleep and then not wake up again. So do not use generators in a garage. Do not use generators near a window. Do not use generators indoors. That is a big no-no. And I've now that we're talking about this, it's just popped into my head as well, because I've heard of this happening before too. Do not use gas grills indoors as well. Anything that burns anything, propane, gasoline, whatever the case may be, and that goes to, I've got this on here as well, vehicles. If you do move your vehicles into a garage, do not run them in the garage. They also produce carbon monoxide that can cause death that way as well. Be prepared to be unable to travel for as much as 2 days. Again, it's not just going to be when the freezing rain is falling, but we're not going to see the roadways. If they do close, they're not going to open again until we spend a significant amount of time above freezing. So you want to make sure that you have supplies and be prepared to be kind of hunkered down at your house for as much as 2 days, maybe even longer. I'd say possibly, potentially up to 3 days, depending on exactly how much ice falls and where that or how long we stay below freezing. Because of the potential for power outages, you want to have food that does not necessarily require heat or water to prepare. So more of the snacky variety. Because we could potentially lose power, that you're not going to be able to use electric ovens, electric stoves. In that case, you could potentially still use gas stoves, but you're probably going to you would have to light them with a match, because you're not going to have any kind of an electric starter for that. Water, you could potentially, if you're on city water in any parts of the area, power outages could potentially reduce or cause a loss in water pressure. I think most water generating plants do have generators, but if those fail, then you could potentially be looking at a loss of water pressure. So bottled water on hand is always a good idea. This is very similar to preparing for a hurricane. If you're planning on riding out a hurricane, you want to take similar precautions. The only difference is you probably will not be able to potentially get out. Unlike after a hurricane where you can potentially get out and get somewhere, you may not be able to do that for a couple of days. I had a coworker of mine laugh when I put this on here, but non-electronic sources of entertainment for children, in the event of power outages. And if you don't have a way to charge cell phones, they are only going to last so long. So board games, the old school stuff that kids hate these days. You might want to have some of those on hand just in case, so they don't get bored out of their mind and then drive you out of your mind. Potentially, with the risk of potential tree branches and stuff coming down, you want to make sure you have vehicles and other breakable objects not under trees, because you don't want to be perfectly fine in the ice storm only to walk outside and discover that a tree branch has crushed your vehicle. So I recommend moving vehicles away from trees if at all possible. Consider putting them in a garage, carport, or some other shelter that'll keep that glaze of ice from developing on your vehicle as well. But again, if you do move it into a garage, don't use it as a source of heat with the garage doors closed, because that carbon monoxide will kill you quick, fast, and in a hurry. All right, so that's what we have here this morning from the National Weather Service. As always, if you have a question, feel free to post them in our comments section here. I'll see a few already, and we'll be happy to answer them over the next few minutes. We are going to plan on doing another one of these this evening. Right now, I'm tentatively planning for 7 p.m. We'll have a few updates from the computer models by then, and then we are going to do another one tomorrow as well. We'll continue doing these regularly until the event has passed. So let me go ahead and back up here, and we'll see if we do have any questions. If not, we'll see you again later this evening. If so, stick around and let's talk about it here for a little while. Let me go ahead and back up to the questions. If you have a question that you posted earlier in the broadcast towards the beginning, I may not be able to see it, so throw it back in there, and I'll be happy to answer it here. Just is Central New Jersey? I guess NJ is New Jersey. Gonna get ice? Please no. I can't speak for New Jersey if that's what you're asking about. That's way beyond our forecast area, so I really don't know anything about that. Sarah, do you think it would be okay to drive from Cameron back to New Orleans Sunday around March? I think that could be potentially dicey. We are looking at, our forecast is for ice accumulation on roads. So as far south as I-10. So there is the possibility that interstates could be shut down, secondary roads could be shut down. So that is, it's definitely not just clear sailing at this point. There's going to be the risk of be looking at road closures. Bobby says, I'm just hopping on. What's the ice accumulation looking like for the area? Well, lucky for you, Bobby, I've got the graphic right here. This is our forecast ice accumulation. Now, it's important to keep in mind that this is likely to change here over the next couple of days. This is just our best, I don't want to call it an estimate, we'll call it forecast because that's what it is. And forecasts are subject to change. But this is what we're looking at right now. We're looking at anywhere between a 100th to a 10th of an inch. Say roughly from Beaumont to Lake Charles over towards Lafayette, further to the north. Up towards southern Beauregard Parish, Allen Evangeline, Hardin County, northern Jefferson County, between about a 10th to a quarter, and then areas roughly along and north of the Highway 190 corridor, you're looking at the potential for between a quarter to a half inch of ice, which is a lot of ice. Again, this is subject to change, but this is what we're forecasting here. We're expecting a lot of precipitation. That's what it is. There's going to be a lot of precipitation either way. The question is going to be how much of it is freezing rain that's going to occur with temperatures below freezing. So this is kind of I don't want to call this a worst case scenario, but this would you'd have to have pretty much the entire area close to or below freezing for a long period of time for this forecast to verify. Patty's asking about Central Mississippi. I can't give details about Central Mississippi. We don't cover that area. There is a Weather Service office in Jackson that does cover Central Mississippi. So I would recommend contacting them. They would have more information about that area than I do. Jenny's asking about the Houston area. We don't cover the Houston area either, I'm sorry to say. Houston has its own Weather Service office. There is a risk of some ice accumulation over that way, but I don't have details as far as exactly how much. Tamara says, I have a vehicle without a garage or a carport. Can I use a car cover? I'm taking by car cover, you probably mean like a tarp or something along those lines. Yeah, you could use that. The ice would potentially accumulate on the tarp as opposed to your vehicle, and then it probably wouldn't, it might get a little heavy, but you could pull that tarp over there, provided the tarp doesn't freeze to your vehicle. But yeah, that would not be a bad thing. The other thing to kind of keep in mind if you're going that route, though, is the potential for it is going to be breezy. So we're going to be looking at some wind blowing as well. So the wind may have the potential to blow that tarp off. So you may want to make sure or see if there's a way to connect the tarp to a vehicle. I don't have one, so I'm not familiar with how tarps and stuff on vehicles would work. But you'd want to make sure that it's connected so it doesn't blow away. But yeah, that would work to keep the ice off your vehicle. Sandy, kind of what we just discussed. Will there be winds with this? It is going to be breezy. It's not going to be absurd, but yeah, we are going to be looking at wind gusts 20, 25 miles an hour. That's we're going to be looking at this strong cold front coming through, and as is the case with most cold fronts, there's usually what we call a pressure gradient. So there's a difference between a high pressure. The cold front itself is an area of low pressure, so that will cause some breezy winds. Yes. Olson says, I'm going to make a big old pot of gumbo Saturday. That sounds like a good idea. I would just do it earlier in the day in case your power goes out. But yeah, good warm pot of gumbo is a good way to go for this event. Ronald asks, can I briefly discuss weather models and why you lean towards one versus the other? We don't lean necessarily towards one versus the other. We look for a consensus approach. So essentially, we have all of these different what we call ensembles. And you've heard of the GFS, the quote-unquote American model, and the European model. And there are several others out there as well. Each one of those has many, many runs, individual runs of them. And a lot of times when you're looking on social media and you see a model that looks like it's going to kill everybody, death and destruction, the world's ending, that's usually one individual run of one individual model. Now, the GFS and the European each have 50 model runs that run every, I think it's 6 hours. So them two by themselves, that's 100 different runs every 6 hours. And what we're looking for is a consensus approach. We want to see a lot of those runs doing the same thing. That gives us confidence in a particular forecast. Now, that doesn't always happen. And when The models are really spread out. In fact, yesterday there was a 25-degree difference, 25-degree spread across the models in terms of temperature. That's a very low confidence forecast. So that's the difference between 45 degrees and 25 degrees, 20 degrees. So that's the difference between nothing but liquid rain and refine and a massive freezing rain event. So that's kind of what we've been dealing with for the last couple of days. I'm sure you've seen on social media plenty of graphics of we're all going to die. But really, it's been a very uncertain forecast until recently, and even now, there's still a lot of uncertainty left. So no, we don't necessarily lean towards one particular model. We look for clusters of models doing the same thing to get an idea of the forecast. Hope asks, for St. Mary Parish, what are we looking at as far as icy roads? That far south, I don't think you're going to be looking at a significant amount of ice accumulation, at least not right now. You can see the graphic here. I can get out of the way and show you St. Mary Parish. That's down there towards Morgan City. We're not officially calling for any significant ice accumulation all the way to the coast. So as far as icy roads down there, the probabilities are pretty low. That's not to say you couldn't get a little bit of ice accumulation, but we're not right now expecting significant travel hazards down right there along the immediate coast in St. Mary. Kenny's asking, will we get ice in New Iberia? Kind of the same thing. We may see a little bit of ice accumulation, but you can see the graphic here not showing much in the way of total ice accumulation. Let me see if I can find the probabilities here again. And we look down that way. So you can see the probability of any amount of ice accumulation for the New Iberia, St. Mary Parish area is 20% or less. So right now, officially a 20% chance of seeing some amount of ice in New Iberia. You can see down towards St. Mary, it's closer to 10%. So we're not expecting a whole lot down there right along the coast as far as ice accumulation. Kelsey asks, could we potentially have another event like the one in 2021? I don't recall off the top of my head. I know that was a very, very cold event. I don't remember how much ice we had with that event. I know that was a pipe busting temperature-wise event, but I don't recall how much ice we had, so I can't really offer a direct comparison. But it is certainly going to be cold. It's certainly going to be pipe busting weather, and we are going to be looking at this potential for ice as well. Brenda says, I bought a kerosene heater for indoors. My normal heat is out. Will it be safe? Not if there's exhaust going into your house. If you're burning kerosene, if there's no vent to vent that outdoors, then no, that's not going to be safe. You're going to have carbon monoxide building up inside. Now, if there's an exhaust vent that exhausts that out a window or something, then that would be okay. But if you don't have an exhaust for a kerosene heater, I'm not exactly sure how those are designed, then those are not meant for indoor use. Trish asks, when will this begin in Southwest Louisiana? We're going to be looking at it beginning probably sometime Saturday afternoon. You're looking at the precipitation chances here. We're going to be looking at roughly liquid precipitation during most of the day Friday. Once that cold front comes through Friday night, that's when we're going to be looking at temperatures dropping below freezing. And so by Saturday is when we're going to be looking at I take that back. I think I said, did I say Friday night? What I meant was we're going to be looking at the freezing rain potentially beginning around midday Saturday afternoon. That's when those below freezing temperatures are going to begin to work into the area. So the cold front itself is going to pass through late Friday night, and then we're going to be looking at some strong northerly winds. We get what's called cold air advection. That's roughly the cold air moving into the area. And then those temperatures will drop below freezing sometime midday Saturday. And that just kind of goes to show that very strong cold air moving in, the fact that we should be at our warmest in the middle of the day. And that's when we're expecting temperatures to get close to freezing. But essentially from Saturday afternoon through Sunday afternoon is when we're looking at the potential for ice accumulation. Trina says Lake Charles should be in the clear. No, Lake Charles is not in the clear. We're looking at, well, our forecast is for a 100th to a 10th of an inch of accumulation in the Lake Charles area. And the probabilities for ice accumulation of any amount, we're looking at about a 30% chance right now in the Lake Charles area, about a 20% chance of more than a 1/10 of an inch. So
It's lower than areas further to the north, but no, Lake Charles is not in the clear. Scotty's asking about the time frame of this. Like we just discussed, I think you probably, if you're still watching, you probably already listened to me discuss this just a minute ago. We're looking at roughly middle of the day, Saturday through early afternoon, Sunday. Tiffany asks, is this considered black ice? The layer of ice that forms on roads would be considered black ice. The black ice means essentially when you have a layer of ice on the roads that's clear, such that you can see the asphalt underneath it. That's what black ice is. So if we do get a layer of ice that develops on the roadways, then yes, that would be considered black ice. Black ice can also form when you have liquid precipitation that falls and you get pools and puddles of water on roads, and then the temperature drops below freezing and that freezes. You can get black ice that way as well. Rose is asking about Laplace. Laplace is actually covered by the New Orleans Weather Service office, so contact them. They'll have more specific details for their area. They often do Facebook Lives. I'm not sure if they've done one yet for this event, but they very well may, so be on the lookout for that. Gene is asking about Avoyelles Parish. Avoyelles Parish is in that higher overall risk of potential accumulation. Avoyelles Parish officially forecast is for 1/4 to a 1/2 inch of ice. That is a lot of ice. So you are potentially looking at some significant impacts from this event. You can see roughly about a 30% chance of more than 1/4 of an inch, about a 50% chance of a 1/10 of an inch, and about a 70% chance of some amount of ice accumulation. So yeah, these impacts we were talking about earlier, be fully prepared for every one of those across Avoyelles Parish. So roads becoming impassable, power lines down, potentially resulting in power outages, and potential tree branches breaking, also potentially causing power outages and potentially falling on vehicles as well. So yeah, Avoyelles Parish, you are very likely to see ice accumulation in this event. Here's Penny discussing the kerosene heaters that I just hit at. Of course, she says this comes from Google. But you see, this is essentially what we're talking about the ventilation. Kerosene produces carbon monoxide exhaust. So unless there is a way that exhaust is getting moved outdoors, then you don't want to use them inside. Nina says, I'm late getting on here. How long, if we get ice, is it expected to stick around in the North Sulphur area? If we get ice, it could potentially stick around as late as sometime on Monday, because the temperatures are going to stay close to or below freezing. You can see we're looking at these long duration temperatures below freezing Saturday night into Sunday, and again Sunday night into Monday. So if the ice develops, it may not wind up going anywhere until sometime Monday afternoon, once those temperatures rise above freezing for a significant amount of time. The rig reporter says, I'm scheduled to run from Houston to Baton Rouge Saturday, requiring me on the road from 5 to 8 p.m. Should I look at cancellations? Yes, I think you should at this point. I can't promise that the roads are going to close, but I can't promise that they're going to be open either. We are expecting ice accumulation to begin early Saturday afternoon. So yeah, there likely would be some ice accumulation. If it's going to happen, it would be underway by that point. Sherry says, I'm late. Will this reposted for rewatch once you're finished? Yes, this will be available as a recording on our Facebook page, our YouTube page, and I think it's on X as well. So yes, this will be available as a recording in its entirety. I think you can also rewind even from now if you want to go back and watch from the beginning. I think you can do that before this live briefing even ends. Shadow Gaming Reviews asks, will it be all right if I drip my outside faucet? My other outside faucets are either closer to heated pipes or right next to the main inlet pipe. The problem with dripping outside faucets is the temperatures are going to be below freezing. So any water you drip outside is then going to turn into a puddle of ice. So if you do that, then you don't want to be walking around out there because you could potentially result in a lot of ice. And if you're in the drip water for hours outdoors, you could potentially result in, you're going to create yourself an ice skating rink, essentially is what's going to happen if you do that. Is that the lesser of two evils? Maybe. But yeah, just kind of keep that in mind. Something to consider if you do that, that you're going to have yourself an ice skating rink in your on your outside porch or wherever you're dripping your faucet. Don asks, can you remind folks to bring in pets? Absolutely. If this is going to be a hazardous condition for pets as well as anybody or anything that's exposed outdoors, we're going to be looking at, besides just the potential for freezing rain and ice, very, very cold temperatures, dangerously cold temperatures, even for pets with coats, dogs, cats. Those are going to be at risk when we're talking about temperatures in the teens, the lower 20s. That's dangerously cold even for them. So yeah, absolutely do recommend bringing in pets. Even if it's just into a garage or something, it's going to be significantly warmer than they would be outdoors. And then when we're talking about precipitation on top of it, if they get hit with that freezing rain that then turns back into liquid on their skin as it heats up, now you're talking about a rain-soaked pet in sub-freezing temperatures. So yeah, that's very, very dangerous. Holly says, what about Sunday? I have a birthday party planned at 3 p.m. indoors, trying to decide if I reschedule for a later date. Depending on where you're at, I would strongly recommend rescheduling if you can. And by where you're at, I mean anywhere off the immediate coast. If you're along the I-10 corridor or north, I'd recommend rescheduling. Even if if it winds up working out that we don't see this kind of amount of ice that shuts down roads, if it were me, I would reschedule. Just, I wouldn't take that risk. Andrea says, when will it be 70 degrees again? Later next week, probably sometime. Yeah, probably maybe Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week. We're in the heart of winter right now. This is, in fact, 1 year ago today, we were discussing the major snowstorm that turned into a blizzard across our area. So 'tis the season for this kind of weather. Jessica asks, will the ice hang around until Monday in the Alexandria area? Potentially, yes. I can't say with certainty yet, but if we see ice accumulation, which is pretty likely that we will at this point in the Alexandria area, we're going to be looking at temperatures close to or possibly below freezing for a long period of time. Yes, there is the possibility the ice could hang around to as late as Monday. I can't say it for certain, but yeah, that is going to be a potential. Kelsey asks, will there be any watches and warnings for Southeast Texas, particularly down to Orange County, Jefferson County? We may issue a winter storm watch that could come as early as this afternoon. That remains to be seen. We've got to coordinate that with our surrounding offices and make sure everybody's on the same page with that. Would it make it as far south as Orange or Jefferson County? Possibly. I think it's much more likely further north, but we could potentially see that as far south as Orange or Jefferson County, but the overall probabilities of seeing significant amounts of ice are lower down that way. Richard Evely asked, when was the last time we had these amounts of ice accumulation? We've had several ice events over the last decade or so. I can't off the top of my head recall them. We've had so many events. I can't keep up with them all. I know we had one we talked a little bit earlier about. I think there was one in 2021. I don't think that was quite as much ice accumulation as we're expecting with this event right now. We've had probably a good half dozen ice events since I've been here in Lake Charles. I've been here 16 years, and we've had probably at least 6 or 7 different ice events in that time. This would be one of the, if this forecast verifies where we're looking at a quarter to a half inch of ice, this would be probably close to, if not the most ice I've seen in my career so far in this area, if this works out. Now, that's not to say that it will, but if we were to get a half inch of ice, that would definitely be the most I've seen in this area in my 16 years. Ashley says, I live near the airport. Should I get ice? Well, that depends on which airport you live near, Ashley. If you're talking about the Lake Charles airport, yeah, you could potentially see some ice. If you're talking about the New Iberia airport, probably not. Sarah asked, do I think this is trending north? Most recently, since last night to this morning, yeah, there has been a little bit of a shift to the north. but that's to be expected. We're still 3 days away. So I do expect there's going to be some bouncing back and forth here and where the ice accumulation is going to occur. The highest overall ice accumulation occurrence is actually going to be north of our area entirely. We're talking North Louisiana, North Mississippi. This storm is going to extend across a very wide swath all the way east to the Carolinas, I do believe, last time I looked. So this is going to be a very large ice storm that can potentially cover a very large area. We're just focusing here locally on southeast Texas and southwest Louisiana, but this is going to have the potential to impact a large swath of the southeastern United States. And that could potentially be a problem, because what's going to happen is if all of those areas see a significant amount of ice accumulation and see a significant amount of power outages, there may not be the kind of mutual aid. After a hurricane, we get all these electrical trucks come in and they start working on the power right away. That may not be quite as readily available if we have such a widespread event. They're going to be focusing on their own areas and trying to get their own areas repaired. So that may result in some slightly longer duration power outages. I don't know that for a fact, but it's just something I was thinking about yesterday and today while looking at this forecast. Carly's asking, will CPSB, I guess that's the Calc-Chaper School Board, be closing Monday? I can't say with any degree of certainty right now. That's up to them. I have no say in that. If there is ice on the roads, I have no doubt they will. But there's still a whole lot of uncertainty there. In a similar vein, Deanna's asking, will it be safe to drive back to Leesville from Lake Charles on Monday? It's going to depend on how much ice falls and exactly where. I can't say that with certainty at this point. Chuck Junker says, I have a propane heater for indoor use, but it still produces hydrogen monoxide. I think you mean carbon monoxide. Okay. Deadly gases still needs to be vented. Yes. And anything that produces carbon monoxide, which is pretty much anything that runs gas or propane or kerosene or anything combustible, is going to need to be vented. Even your propane or gas stoves are usually required to be vented. You have a vent above the stove for that reason, because those produce carbon monoxide, usually in lower levels, but they still do produce them. Doug Laspy, ice possibilities for St. Landry Parish. You are looking at some ice possibilities in St. Landry Parish. Here's you can see our forecast there, looking at between about 1/10 to 1/4 inch of ice accumulation across the St. Landry Parish area. So probabilities are reasonably high for that. Let me see if I can get the actual probabilities back up here. Been smarter of me to put these closer together, but you're looking at roughly about a 50 to 60% chance of seeing some amount of ice accumulation across St. Landry Parish. Emily's asking, will ice stick around in Lake Charles to Cameron for Monday? I don't know that we're going to get ice as far south as Cameron, but we are going to be looking at the potential for some ice sticking around to as late as Monday. It's going to depend on exactly what those temperatures are going to be. So I can't say with certainty right now, because if we get above freezing, even if it's just 33 or 34 degrees, if we get above there for a few hours, then that ice will have the potential to melt off. Jennifer's asking, it says, I'm late joining, but are the accumulations expected to start Saturday night or Saturday during the day? Potentially Saturday during the day, because of that very strong, what we call cold air advection, those very cold winds being blown in. We could be looking at ice accumulations beginning as early as noon, perhaps even a little earlier than that, perhaps late morning on Saturday. And then continuing through late morning or early afternoon Sunday. So roughly about a 24-hour period that we could be looking at potential ice accumulations. I've got a few people saying that they lost their audio or video. I think that may be an internet connectivity problem. I apologize for that. Unfortunately, there's not much I can do about that. That's government work for you, our government internet connectivity. And that's probably on my end. Someone said to do a refresh and maybe that would work. I apologize for that. unfortunately, I'm limited by the internet availability they give me. All right, I think I've reached the bottom of my question thread here. That may be because we've lost internet connectivity. But regardless, I think we're going to go ahead and go ahead and stop it here. We've been going on for about an hour. If you have a question that I missed for some reason, I promise you I didn't do it on purpose. Or if you think of one while you're viewing this as a recording, feel free to send us a message directly on our Facebook page. You're likely watching on here, either that or YouTube, and you can send us a message on Facebook. You can send us a message on X. Send us a message on Instagram. You can send me an email directly. My email's been on your screen there. It's donald.jones@noaa.gov, down there in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can also give us a call if you'd like at area code 337-477-5285. That's our office number here. During regular business hours, we only have those numbers available till 4 o'clock this afternoon, but you can always message us anytime if you do have questions, and we'll be happy to answer them that way. We are going to plan on doing another one of these this evening. We'll plan to do it at 7 o'clock, so we'll see you back here then. And then we are doing another one tomorrow morning as well. We'll continue to do these regularly until the event is passed and the hazard is over, whichever comes first. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay safe, stay dry. It is going to be raining out there, although it's not going to be of the freezing variety, but it's going to be of the wet variety. So stay dry out there, and we'll talk to you again this evening.